Good afternoon, and welcome to this School of the Environment seminar. This is actually also a class for some of you, for many of you, but we also have people come from off campus to hear our guest speaker today, and thank you for coming. My name is Tony Charles. I'm as well as being one of the profs of one of those classes, I'm the director of the School of the Environment. And really want to welcome today our guest speaker, and I'm sure you know who he is, having seen the advertising for this. Ryan O'Quinn is with the Ecology Action Centre. He's going to say a few words about the Ecology Action Centre. Hopefully everyone has some knowledge of that organization. Oh yes, okay, I see it. Seat at the back there if you'd like. Yeah. So Ryan will give you a little idea about the Ecology Action Centre because that's what he does. And I've invited Ryan to manage the session as he likes. I think I can say safely that he's looking for a little feedback from people as he goes along. So jump right in there. And Ryan, thank you so much for coming. We're really looking forward to this.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks. Good afternoon. As Professor Charles just said, I'm Ryan O'Quinn. I'm the Membership and Development Coordinator at the Ecology Action Centre. So thanks a lot for having me today. I'm actually really humbled to be here. This is my first quote-unquote lecture or seminar. So I'm really excited. I've done a lot of public work, but this is my first time in this format, getting to share a little bit of an area of expertise that particularly intrigues me and is somehow directly tied to the environment. So I'm not going to lie, I saw the list of other speakers and I suddenly got nervous at first when you mentioned having me here. I was like, sure, I'll do that, no problem. And I was like, oh geez, Megan Leslie, I'm a huge fan. Saying that totally outside of a work context. So I'm Ryan, I'm the Membership and Development Coordinator. I'm with the Ecology Action Centre. I want to set up the session today so we feel like we can actually just talk. So if you want to just say something, if you want to raise your hand and ask a question as we go along, we're not in a room of 400, 500 people. This is intimate, and this is a really neat and interesting area, and I really want to explore how we feel about it and dig deeper and also see how it can apply to your backgrounds. I know we're not all sustainability students in this room. We have IDS, we have some business management, we have some concerned citizens who care about the environment, etc. So there's a wide range. So I really implore anyone to just please come in and chat and offer some input. So I'll give you a really quick rundown of the Ecology Action Centre. The Ecology Action Centre is one of the largest, oldest, and most active environmental groups in Nova Scotia, Atlantic Canada, and arguably now, luckily for us, even in Canada, we're now one of the larger environmental groups, which is really, really exciting for us. We're a really interesting organization. We organize ourselves quite differently than most traditional nonprofits. So we are a charitable organization. We have 45 staff. Some are world-renowned PhD activists. We have researchers. We have community members. We have volunteers. So 45 staff. We have 400 active volunteers, but we have a list of 1,200 volunteers. And we actually now have 4,000 members, which is really exciting for us. I've been heavily involved in that angle, hence the title, Membership and Development Coordinator is my title. So we organize ourselves into action areas. We're a flatline, horizontally organized group, so it's very different than any typical structure of an organization you may find. Leads to really interesting decision-making processes, really good conversations. The way we organize our organization is to make sure that we're always open and inclusive. And so I really want to emphasize that, at least from the side of the Ecology Action Centre. I'm going to try to avoid saying EAC, but if I do, it means Ecology Action Centre. We're told not to say that because people might not know what I'm saying. So we have 7 different action areas. We have built environment, we have marine, we have energy, transportation, wilderness and forestry, coastal and water, and food. And we used to say we had a committee structure, and we've changed that recently to action areas to reflect that ecosystem thinking. no one silo is independent of another, that these are all interconnected topics. And because since we've done that, we're having really interesting conversations. A lot of the work our marine team does is clearly about seafood, but seafood is food, and that clearly would tie into our food action team as well. So that's how we organize ourselves. What's really neat is each one of those action areas meets open to the public. Once a month, you can join and show up to any one of those meetings. You don't have to call in advance. You don't have to send a resume. Just show up if you're interested in any one particular area. It's a really neat avenue if you're looking to get involved with an issue, or if you want to become more engaged with some stuff that's happening on the ground or find out a little bit more what's happening with the environment. Our purpose as an organization is to primarily inform people about environmental matters happening in our province. You wanted to find out what's happening in Nova Scotia in your backyard with the environment. There's not a long list of places you could go that could give you a lot of solid, up-to-date information. So we're one of those resources. We act as a resource center. We help field questions from university students all the time with their research papers and their topics, concerned citizens. I try to avoid the word stakeholders, but people who are being negatively impacted by situations with our natural environment. They come to us and we work to help represent them. And we have this vision of a more environmentally and more sustainable future for our province. We've been going since '71, which is pretty incredible, so 44 years, which is really remarkable. And a lot of people who helped found our organization can be found either on our board of directors or are still heavily engaged active volunteers even today, which is really amazing to be able for us to have our roots based on our history, where we came from and where we're trying to go. So fun fact, we helped start the first recycling and composting program in Nova Scotia. So back when people thought it was a little crazy that you would actually take your bottles and your cans and you would put them all together, we were doing it then. And what's really neat is what was on the fringes then is now mainstream now. So I like to hope and think that a lot of the new things Ecology Action Center is working on right now that might be a little on the fringes to people right now will be a really comfortable idea in about 10 or 15 years from now. Yes?
When was that, when you started recycling?
1971.
Oh, the recycling problem already?
Yeah, so that's when we first kicked off our recycling and composting program, which helped kind of really provide the structure for what we see today. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but we do have a world-class recycling system. We have actually the highest waste diversion rate in the industrialized world here in Nova Scotia. People from other countries such as the Bahamas will come here not for our lovely seaside beautiful view, but they'll actually come and look at our recycling and composting system, so I find that interesting. If anyone's got a U-Pass, if you've ever taken the bus, the Ecology Action Center helped create the format and the forum to create the U-Pass. That resulted in 55,000 extra bus rides a year, which is really neat. Again, we never really do anything alone, and I always really make that loud and clear. We work with a lot of environmental groups, community groups, concerned individuals. I mean, we could be working with you tomorrow. If you show up and you really care about an issue that's happening in your backyard, we could be new partners. So why me? Why from the AAC? We have 45 amazing activists. We've got some leaders, so why did I end up here today? Well, Professor Charles and I struck up a conversation, and I've been focusing on how to boost our membership. We had a membership of 800 people 3.5 years ago, and that core group of 800 have pretty much been supporting our organization since 1971, give or take as we've gone through the decades. And now we have over 4,000 paid members. And so how did you do that? And how did that happen? Well, we've got an amazing team. We were at the right stage at the right time to have this happen, but a large part is how we want to communicate our message as an organization with everybody. This matters to all of us. We're in this all together. There's only one environment that we are not separate from. And I wanted to touch on that topic a little bit today. But I also have a background in international development. Don't judge me, a Dal grad, but I do love St. Mary's a lot. But I've spent some time working with farmers in Uganda. I've done some teaching in Sri Lanka during the civil conflict. And then I ended up working in the nonprofit fundraising for a bunch of different organizations and working on building supports for their campaigns. And then I started working for environmental campaigns, and I found something really different. And it was frustrating. Campaigning for the environment is way harder than any other topic I've ever addressed. From disaster relief, from human rights, this is a whole other ballgame, and I'm like, why? And it was bothering me. And I also see a really interesting intersect between communication What good is our work, what good is anything that we do if we don't communicate it properly, if people aren't receiving those messages and understanding what we're doing, right? How do we get ourselves out there so that we can actually create action, take change, build our communities? A lot of this is all based and rooted in our ideas and thoughts and how we decide to communicate them and how we want to connect with people. So I find that intersect really, really interesting. And then I have a bit of a fundraising / kind of, I guess, marketing background as well. So it's an interesting confluence of factors. So like I said, this whole word separate from our natural environment. The environment. The environment. Well, we got to help the environment. The environment has this issue. It's not our environment. It's the environment. It's why do we see it as something over there? Like we need to change the bike lanes, we need to help the environment. And I don't know how to properly articulate it, but I know that and I feel like there's this great separation. And so when I'm trying to connect with people, and I'll give you a really quick example of how I did it once. I was speaking to someone, and I was trying to talk about how we're still dragging groundfish in Nova Scotia. 60 to 70% of the groundfish still caught in this province is caught from a net that's dragged on the bottom of our ocean. This is 2015. That's insane. I cannot believe that. And we're still dragging at the bottom, taking everything with it. So I was trying to really connect with someone about this issue, and they weren't clicking. They're like, oh yeah. They weren't getting the gravity of what I was trying to say. So I said, well, you know what, this is what it's like. If you're hunting in an area you're allowed to hunt in, and you see the deer that you're about to go get, and you pull out that rifle, but before you shoot, you decide to take a bulldozer, and you knock down every single tree and every animal out of the way on your way to get that one deer, is that a sustainable way to be hunting? And suddenly, I just saw the spark in that person's eyes. I said, oh, no, that's, you can't do that. And I said, of course you can't do that, but that's what we're doing with our fish. So what's the disconnect? Is that because we don't see our marine ecosystems? Is that because we're not intimately interacting with them all the time? I don't know. It's complicated. I don't think there's any one black and white answer, and I think some of the ideas I want to present today, I don't think are either one or the other. I think there's still a lot of gray area. Like I said, campaigning for the environment is different. Why? So a lot of these organizations I've worked for, appreciate, and I'm not here to say any one effort is not better than any one effort or any one issue is not more important than any other issue. But there's a sense of appeal here. We can connect when we look in the eyes of another person. We see it on the news. There's an immediate way for us to connect. And how do people connect? People connect emotionally and through stories and through our irrational side of our brain, our emotion brain, our emotive brain connects us to things and ideas and issues. So I've worked on a lot of these campaigns. And then I tried working for the environment. And let me tell you, a whole other ballgame. And why? And I really feel like how we want to communicate it, how we decide to connect with people on that issue is a large part of what made it way more difficult for me and other people on my campaign. Just going to get my notes caught up with my slides here. I'm getting all excited. So here's a little description of how we could put together the disconnect. What is the most important problem facing Canada today? This was done in 2013, Environics Institute for Research, and also founded by the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation in UQAM in Montreal. So, environment, number 8. Well, 8 points, but number 4. But what do you think will be the most important problem facing Canada in the future if nothing is done to address it? Well, number 1, climate change, environment, pollution. So it's saying we need to do something now, but it's not necessarily the biggest problem we've got going right now, but it's gonna be. So already you can see a bit of a disconnect. And I started calling my campaign Rhetoric with Reality. We all want to do something with the environment. Oh, I don't know, is that more sustainable or not? You know, before I went to grab this cup, I was like, well, should I get a plastic cup? Should I get a paper cup? Where's my footprint? What's more sustainable? We're all being sent all these different messages, and sometimes when we're left more confused, it kind of freezes us up a little bit, I feel. So I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect happening here. And I started telling people, well, my campaign is about rhetoric with reality. If you want to have an impact, why not support an environmental organization? Most people don't. Take a look here. So here's all of the different categories. I'm sorry if it's not very clear, it's a bit small. But what I will tell you in terms of where donor dollars go and how people support organizations, and again, monetary capacity. This is not the only way to support an organization, but it's a quick glimpse. If you look, religious organizations, 46% of all donor dollars go to religious institutions in Canada. The next runner-up, I believe, is healthcare at 15, and then you look at environment, 2. That number has been stagnant for a very long time. The environment is one of the top concerns, receives the least amount of funding and attention. Now, I'm not saying there's a direct correlation. Maybe we feel like it's the government's job to do it and they're not doing it, so we think it's a government issue. So maybe it's not a natural thought to think, well, maybe I should support an environmental group and that's one way I can have an impact. Might not be instinct. I know when I first did environmental charity, I was like, oh, my typical idea of charitable is, donations and exchange of a good to help someone in time of need. Any questions so far? Any comments, observations? Cool, okay. So, I'm going to tell you a really funny story. I went to a guy's store and I was talking to him, and I do a lot of face-to-face campaigning because I love people, I love connecting, I love exchanging ideas. And I was talking to this guy, and he's like, yeah, I agree. We started talking about fracking. I hear you. And you know what he said? He said the oddest and strangest thing. I have literally talked face-to-face with I don't even know, 15, 20,000 people. And he said, one of the only people I've heard it, but I've seen elements of this. He said, well, you know what? I want to get behind what you're saying. I said, well, why don't you come to our office for a meeting sometime? It's open. Just show up. Bring a friend so you're not there by yourself. Just check it out. And he said, well, you know what? Every time I see an interview on the news, every time I hear someone speaking about the environment, I can't relate to that person. And I'm not going to go and give you the exact stereotype of what he thought an environmentalist was, but I'm sure you can conjure it up probably in your mind, what you might think someone looks like who cares about the environment. I like to have a nice haircut. I have tattoos. I care about the environment. My life depends on it. My wife's life depends on it. My future children's lives depend on it. So what does it mean to say oh, this is what an environmentalist looks like, and therefore I can't see eye to eye with you because you're too different than me? And that, I couldn't believe it. I'm not gonna lie. He then said something slightly offensive, and then I got a little upset, but I didn't show it, and I just said, well, thanks for the conversation tonight. Have a great night. And I took off. But it sparked this idea in my mind of what it means to care about our earth. Is it that crazy? Is it that out there? To care about the thing that sustains everything? So here's a bit of a downer, but I don't want to be a downer, so I'm a pretty positive person. But so compared to 2007, more people think that scientists have exaggerated climate change. The public's concern and willingness to change behavior to mitigate the impacts of climate change have actually decreased. Yikes. Lower levels of trust in climate scientists than other types of scientists. So this actually came from an article that was critiquing what I'm about to present to you. So I did go and look at the other side as much as I could, and we'll talk about that. But so is this a communication breakdown? Why is this happening? Or this author argued, well, there's a finite pool of worry, between economy, jobs, your health. Think of all the mixed messages we get about our health now. I don't even know what kind of fat is a good fat to eat anymore. I have no idea. So is it a finite pool of worry? Well, I don't know. I think it's all interconnected. I really did. So I found this really interesting, and this kind of intros the next part that I really want to present today and talk about something called values modes. Has anyone heard this concept before? Cool. Okay. So what this is value modes is a psychographic mapping system which looks at values that underlie our behavior. Behavior is generally a strong determinant of your opinion. Therefore, the drivers are values that affect behavior, which then shape opinion. So it's basically like how you feel in your basic value set is going to determine how you hear things and then your actions. It's actually rooted in your value system, whatever that value system may be. So the authors, and this came actually, and the reason why I wanted to choose this topic, and I thought this was interesting, and we have addressed this at a staff meeting at the Ecology Action Center once, and it proved to have some really interesting conversations. But the reason why I chose it, because the authors of this approach chose climate change as one large study that they did. Just take this approach and apply it to the concept of climate change and see how it worked. So I'll explain it. So the authors argued that people can kind of fall into three different groups: settlers, prospectors, and pioneers. We're already putting people into three basic groups. Like there's already an inherent problem with this. I don't personally feel like everyone fits in one nice fit little category. I see this as a spectrum, kind of like a spectrum of ideology. If you think of the political spectrum, maybe even the gender spectrum. I don't see it as one or the other. But anyway, so the authors start with this, and then it gets a little more complicated. So basically, who are our settlers? Settlers are a group whose needs are physiological. They care about safety and security and belonging. So those are their core needs. And their characteristics: family and home, caring for them. They tend to be at the center. For those living alone, friends take the place of family. Tradition, family structure, normal, conservative, conscious, wary of crime, wary of change, more comfortable with regular and routine situations, concerned about what the future holds. So this is the quick rundown of what a settler could be. Ever heard anyone feel this way? Or it's okay, you don't have to put up your hand if you are a settler. I think, again, we all have elements of each one of these, and it's not a bad thing to be this either. You need to make that clear. But this is one way of looking at a value set. Okay? So next, we've got prospectors. Prospectors sound exactly what a prospector would be. They're very outward. They need the esteem of others, and they heavily rely on self-esteem. Their characteristics: they want to be successful, want to be the best, lots of opportunities and abilities. They take pleasure in recognition and reward. They want to maximize their opportunities. Trend, fashion conscious. They like new ideas and new ways. They're generally optimistic about the future. Sound like anyone you know? Does anyone know a settler or a prospector so far? Anyone know? Yeah, okay. Figured. Anyone else know one of these two subgroups or elements thereof? Right, okay. So next, pioneers. The old pioneers. Aesthetic cognitive. I had never even heard that term before. I had to look that one up. Still might not even know what that means. And all about self-actualization. So their characteristics: trying to put things together and understand the bigger picture, the concern about environment, society, world poverty. They're always looking for questions and answers. Strong internal sense of what is right and what is wrong. Strong desire for fairness, justice, equality. Self-assured and sense of self-agency. Generally positive about change, if it seems worthwhile. Cautiously optimistic about the future. Anyone know a pioneer? Anyone feel like they're a pioneer? Okay. So, this kind of sums up in a really funny infographic. I apologize that there's no other backgrounds represented here. I took this from the actual guide that the authors had made. So here you go, you got your prospector. 44% of the UK in 2007 in this study said they were a prospector. I follow my own self-interest. I am motivated by status. Then we got your pioneers. I follow my conscience. I am motivated by ethics. 35% of England. And then you got your settlers. Well, I'm motivated by I'll follow you. So, interesting way to look at it. Again, we'll break it into a little more subcategories of each one of these, but this is how they saw it. And now, if you were to guess, if I'm trying to communicate issues about climate change, about the environment, which one of these is the hardest for us to connect with? I'll give a solid high five to anyone who guesses the right answer.
Because prospectors are hard to connect with anybody.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. Prospectors, they're definitely the hardest group for us to get in touch with. So the hardest group that we could possibly get a message to comprise of 44% of England. Okay, so then are we asking ourselves, who are we trying to talk to? who are we trying to influence? Are we just talking to ourselves? And if we only talk to ourselves, how far are we really going to go? I'm not going to lie, I was a little freaked out when I first read this. I was like, oh my god, I have so many prospector characteristics, and I thought it meant I was a bad person. Don't worry, I'm comfortable to say that I have prospector characteristics. I don't think it's bad to want to be successful at a career. So again, this isn't about shaming. This is about thinking the things that drive your values that affect your decision making. So it's going to get a little complicated, but we're just going to touch the complicated lightly. So what the authors did is then they said, okay, well clearly it's not just 3 categories that the whole world and everybody fits in. It's actually, backwards, a bunch more. So I'm only going to really investigate the prospectors. So we have our golden dreamers, our happy followers, our now people, and our tomorrow people. So they kind of said, okay, so out of this spectrum, so this is like 3 spectrums inside of another spectrum. Again, no one is just one thing, but everyone is kind of fluid. And there's something interesting that I want to explore in a second. So here you have your golden dreamers. They have just become a prospector. They just either got that house or that they just finished 25 years of their career. They're getting status. People are recognizing them. They know the Joneses know them. Great. I'm achieving what I want. Then you got your happy followers. Your happy followers, they've already been a golden dreamer. They're ready to follow whatever trend is about to kind of come next, as long as it's as long as it's safe and it's proven and it's trendy, I'll take it. Okay, so there's your happy followers. Then you got your now people. Your now people are really, truly the epitome of your prospector. They are just, they have the fanciest cars, they have the most up-to-date gadgets. Oh, my cell phone's outdated, out the window, got a new one, These really are your status symbols, the people who believe in that and follow that. And then you got your tomorrow people. And now your tomorrow people are actually the most interesting, I find, out of this whole group. Why? Because the tomorrow people, they're already kind of done being a prospector. So they've got all these things. They know the Joneses. They got the mansion. They've fulfilled their list. So now they're starting to think to themselves, well, okay, so there must be more to life than status and recognition. So they're just starting to ask themselves that question. So that's kind of interesting, because I feel like every single one of these groups we can appeal to. These are people that we're already talking to. But what I'm interested in is when we start speaking the same language, but our values get in the way, and we don't actually understand that we're agreeing on the same thing. Now imagine being what it's like being a top-level official in government, when you got to listen to the voice of the Ecology Action Center, but then you're listening to the voice of the community, then you're also listening to the voice of the business sector, and then you've got your scientists. So you have that representation. So how do you get a consensus? So I'm like, wow, this probably isn't as easy as it sounds. So that's your quick breakdown of prospectors. Any questions so far? Cool. Okay, so this is kind of funny. And this is as intense as it's going to get. And I find this really interesting. So everyone who's as close to the center as possible. So here's your one group. Here's your pioneers. Up here are your settlers, sustenance driven. And over here you got your prospectors. The furthest you are away from the center is basically the furthest extreme you are on that spectrum. Okay? So what I thought was really interesting is, let's get close to the circle. And if you are a shrewd spiritual socialist, you're one of each. Shrewd, okay, socialist, spiritual. So you're kind of like all of them, right? So you're not one or the other, but you kind of fit somewhere in the middle. So I find that really interesting, because again, you don't have to fall into this nice, neat little category. So then, let's look at the most polar opposite example. So I was really pining over this today, and the best one I came up with was the adaptable, non-reflective, impulsive spender. Oh, that's so funny. So adaptable, okay? Where's non-reflective? I'm not going to reflect about anything. And then impulsive spender. So those are clearly all very far away from each other. You're not going to kind of find them all wrapped in one. So you could see how some people could be a little bit further, but you can also see a little bit of how we intersect with each other. So is that going to make everything easy? No. So that's like, now how do I communicate knowing this? And who fits into what category, and how am I going to communicate my message that I think Nova Scotia needs a coastal act? Oh, jeez. This gets a little tougher, doesn't it? So, okay, bear with me. And it looks a little weird, but just bear with me. So again, here's your breakdown of England. 20% are settlers, 40% are prospectors, 40% are pioneers. Again, your settlers, traditional, safety, security. Prospectors, wealth, status symbols. Pioneers, big picture thinkers. Okay, and then they break it all down. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah, no.
the settlers you described as kind of small c conservative, like care about your own family and that
Yep.
sort of thing. I'm just surprised it's a small percentage.
Yeah, interesting.
Like I would have thought that that would be kind of quite a prominent.
Right. Yeah. And I guess, well, so this is, I mean, it could be dependent upon what riding you look at, what country. So this is England in 2007. Something that I wanted to propose is, as topics become more and more mainstream, you're going to shift your perception around it as well. When become more, how did each one of these groups feel about climate change in 1991 versus how these groups feel about climate change and taking action on it in 2015? So yeah, and I think, Tony, that could be related to, again, just putting them in those three distinct categories. And it surprised me too, because, you know, if I'm thinking someone's around here and we need to get to this 60%, you know, how much of our communications is targeted at what? But again, I'll show you a next spectrum about how some of these can easily be influenced by each one of these. So, and this is what it shows. So it shows your roots, your RT, your roots are your furthest settlers, and they move into or can influence the smooth sailings, so over your smooth sailings. Then we go into brave new worlders, and then certainty first. So that's your settlers. Then you get the certainty firsts go into your golden dreamers. Again, they are really the furthest out on the prospector spectrum. Then you get into happy followers, then into now people to tomorrow people. And then, again, the chain continues into your pioneers, and then you get your transitionals, concerned ethicals, the furthest down the spectrum, the ones that will be very quick to tell you that you need to stop doing what you're doing now because it is wrong. I'm not going to tell you why, but you should know that. I can't even believe you're drinking out of that cup right now. So that's what you're getting over here, okay? And then they're gonna positively affect your flexible individuals, and then into your transcenders. So what's kind of neat, and I don't know everything about each one of these subcategories because I'm not gonna dig that deep into all 12, but some influence one or the other, and I'll give some examples of how that can happen. And again, I'd be really interested to see how this differs from country to country, culture to culture. And think, if you're an IDS student and you are suddenly in a developing world and you're dealing with communications coming from your head office. My sister works in Laos for the World Food Program, so I get to hear very interesting conversations about diplomats showing up in the country and then dealing with delivery on the ground and what that kind of looks like and dealing with this very large spectrum. Okay. Yeah?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
All those points, especially on the previous graph, there must have
This one?
Yeah. They are not randomly located there, so there must be criteria, there must be some norm, some distances. Do you know how they are doing this?
You know what? I
Is
don't.
this some kind of principal component analysis? Does this sound
Yeah.
familiar?
Yeah.
Something like that?
I don't actually know the answer to
But
that.
there must be a meaning associated with a distance between points, right? And in directions, I suppose, right? Because the distance between global and equanimity or global and adaptable
Yeah.
is lower than, let's say, no sweat and independent, right? And that must be probably associated with some meaning, because otherwise the discussion would be
Yeah, it would be in
At
order.
least.
And I mean, I think that's where I think you bring up a good point, because then it brings into the whole quagmire of how do we interpret a word? What does that mean to different individuals based on what criteria and on your background? So I feel like, again, I don't actually know the answer, but what I would say, and I could check into how the researchers came up with this, I think it's a scoring system on 1 to 10 on how you feel about one particular issue, and then they plotted you out on the map. But again, this is where I really think is important. It's not one or the other, and I think that's what this really does show. Because I mean, I think we could all look into a word in here and see how you relate to that word and how you feel about it, even if it is a little bit further up here. Because you got to take one issue at a time. That's the caveat. Because I feel differently about climate change in terms of if I feel into one of these categories than I do about, well, I don't know, how important it is for me to have a nice pair of shoes. You know, I'm going to feel differently about that than other topics. So you almost have to take it one topic at a time into who's going to fall where. Because again, like you'll find people on the right wing of the political spectrum might really be into a carbon tax and some people might not be. But we are in the same end of the spectrum. So how does that work? Same as on the left, same as your centrists, right? There's going to be things that we agree and we disagree with. And that's I'm working to that next point actually. So who listens to who? Okay, so I got a really funny real life example of this. So we had an event, and a sponsor from the event went to get on stage to tell that sponsor's story. And as soon as the sponsor opened their mouth, I got really worried. She grabbed the mic and she's like, "I didn't like the environment." And I'm like, oh no, what's she gonna say next? She's got a really nice purse on, she's dressed really well, it's a fancy little thing. You know, I didn't care how far I drove to work, I would eat whatever I wanted, I didn't really care. But now, I work for this great company, I feel so differently about things, I only shop at the farmer's market, I got an amazing eco-friendly vehicle, I think about what I buy before I buy it, you'll always see me at Planet Organic on Quimpool, and so I'm listening to that and okay, interesting. So are you now feeling that way because it's trendy and okay to feel that way? Or are you feeling that way because that's where your values sit and that's why did you shift your values and to get to that place? Or are you just saying that because one thing that does appeal to prospectors is once it becomes trendy, once it becomes palatable, once there's no risk. Because what if I suddenly put 15 solar panels on my roof and the people next door start laughing at me, the Joneses? I'm like, what are you doing? You know? That would make a prospector feel weird. They don't want to take that risk. They don't want to look strange. And so it actually hit me last night. I was like, oh my gosh, this person is a great example of maybe what this means. So really, really quickly, how does a pioneer talk to now people, pioneers? So I'm thinking a lot from my perspective at work, where I would place ourselves in some ways. Again, it's not one or the other. Not saying everyone in EAC is a pioneer. But what I will say is that, and what the authors argue, is that pioneers can actually talk to now people because now people are actually the people who don't care about money. Now people are part of the prospectors. They will actually drop hundreds of thousands of dollars on retrofitting their entire home to make it energy efficient. Now, does that mean they're hardcore ethical environmentalists? Or are they doing it because, you know, it's trendy? Oh, my power bill is like $10 because I got these solar panels. And they're the newest ones, and there's this great company in town. Love them. Okay, so then you have that group, right? Also, too, how what we want as pioneers and these ethic ideas, and we want better energy, you could also have a group of people up here. They'll do it if it's fashionable, they'll do it if it's mainstream. So again, it's like, well, we all recycle now. Well, it's law, but we all do it. And in fact, how often do we hear people say, I've heard it a million times, oh, like I recycle my kids. They're always like, Dad, why are you doing that? I need to recycle more. So, and that actually fits into a few of these groups. Some of these groups actually say they will listen to their kids more than anywhere else. And actually, it was also stated in the research that that prospectors get the majority of their information that they base their opinions on from adverts. Advertisements inform their opinions on their value sets. Yikes. So also pioneers over here, how can they affect a brave new world settler? Now this one's interesting. They could actually agree on something. So again, settlers, traditional, roots-based laws, heavy-handed to the law. How could they see with the ethical pioneers? Well, let's put it this way. Let's say the issue is cut down on our energy consumption. And we have, and let's say laws are in place around that. So they're going to see eye to eye on that issue, but through different lenses. The pioneers are like, great, because we need to be cutting it down. We need to think about our carbon footprint. We need to reduce our energy so that we can switch more to sustainable sources of our energy. But then you've got your settlers who say, well, there's a law and we need to respect our laws. I can't even, my neighbor has their windows open and I know they're wasting energy and they're breaking the rules. So in one way, they could kind of see eye to eye a little bit in that sense, in that lens. So thinking about how we can kind of bridge gaps through, they could end up arguing at the same table but agreeing on the same issue. It's just how they kind of get there. Kind of interesting. And then down here, your tomorrow people. Remember I said they were kind of the interesting part of the prospector spectrum? They're interesting because they're kind of done with it. They're done with the status. They want something else. So they could actually be easily influenced by a new idea from the pioneers, by this a new concept, a new way of thinking, because they've already done it, they've had it, and they're ready for something else. So this kind of section of people might be easily swayed or influenced by someone else in the pioneer category. Are we lost? How are we feeling so far? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Confused? Like the cat in sushi? I only did that because someone taught me that if you ever do a presentation, you have to have an image of a cat in it. Every time I do it, it works. So it rouses. And that cat does look very confused. Why am I in a piece of sushi? Humans are nuts. So, okay. So before I go into kind of this next section, does anyone have any feeling about this approach right now? Because this could be, you know, it could be a controversial method of how we want to evaluate things. I am also not saying that the Ecology Action Center endorses this type of thinking. I totally just spat everywhere. I'm saying that this is one thing I've looked at in terms of how I've been able to connect with people. Because I came from this angle on, I want you to support an organization that I believe in, that I know is making change, that I know is affecting all of our lives and is having an impact. So if I'm talking to that person right now, how do I connect with them? I'll give you another really quick example. I had one girl, she goes, I don't even care about the environment. I was like, okay. Yeah, no, I don't care about it, and my sister bugs me all the time. She always gives me a hard time about the environment. And I said, well, wouldn't your sister be awfully surprised if she woke up tomorrow morning and you had like an Ecology Action Center membership form on your table? And you're like, what's up now? And she goes, oh, that'd be funny. I'm like, it would be, wouldn't it? She goes, I'll sign up. I said, great. Do you want to buy her a membership as a gift? She goes, oh, that's really good. I was like, why not? Because in my mind, if they read our magazines, if they're reading our emails, if they're engaging with our mission and our values, we're getting small steps. We're getting small wins in the right direction, in a direction I believe should be a more sustainable, healthy place for all of us to live. So here's some examples from the actual research and some comments that people made. So when they asked them the question, what do you know and think about climate change? Prospector said, oh, it's all being very overhyped by the media. It's where the money is these days. I'm not even convinced it's all down to us. Don't get me wrong, I do believe it's an issue, but unless the USA and China get their act together, what difference can we make? There's some validity, but is that the right, I don't know, it's not necessarily what I believe, but I mean, you could easily see how someone could attach the two very large carbon emitters and saying, well, if they're not going to do anything, why does it matter if I take the bus or if I drive my car? If we're putting in, 3,000 new vehicles on the road every day in Beijing. So you can kind of see it, but I don't know. There's different ways that we can reach out to this. So then to that same question, someone said, well, it does worry me, maybe not for my kids, but perhaps their kids. In some way, I'm actually quite enjoying the warmer weather. Come to Nova Scotia, please. Minus 23 today with wind chill. Although it does make you feel a bit guilty. I try my best, but it's hard to know what's going to happen. So when asked, well, what am I doing about it? I recycle everything, clothes, shoes, plastic, paper. I always put the chargers out of the wall, and I have a few of those energy-saving light bulbs, but for a lot of my lights, they won't fit and aren't bright enough. I need someone to tell me what to do. It's all mixed messages. Okay? So really interesting here, because how do we get the message across? And how do we not only get the message across in the right way, but how do we also get them to listen? So And I thought this was interesting. I need someone to tell me what to do. Like blatantly saying, give me direction and I will follow. So I feel like that's interesting. That's something to work with. You know, how do we connect with that? So here's a kind of a list of do's and don'ts for all of these categories. And let's put this in the frame. This slide is about how they felt about climate change, and this is from the research, but what I'll do is I'm gonna try to frame this in terms of if I was speaking to any one of these groups about something like a coastal act, okay? So do's and don'ts for prospectors. Don't talk about implications, don't anything too remote, and they're not very bothered. Don't use messengers or voices. I keep forgetting I can look down here. It's hurting my neck. With lack of authority or who could be challenged. Don't criticize behaviors, don't tell them they're doing anything wrong, don't ask them to give anything up, and don't ask them to be the first ones to do anything or invoke critical judgment of others. But this is what you could do with this group so that they do listen. Talk about local, visible, negative changes to loss or damage. Show the significance of emissions of those of normal people like them. Use interest in home and garden, deploy the nag factor of the children, and create offers which are above easy, cost-effective, instant, and painless. So that's very a marketing statement. So if we want to step away from that thought, and if I was talking to someone who had this kind of belief and I wanted to talk about why Nova Scotia needs a coastal act, I would say, well, to be honest with you, I've met homeowners whose homes are now in the ocean. They dump their life savings into the place that they want to spend their time at, but it's gone. Why? Because we're being allowed to put houses and cottages and structures in areas that are naturally eroding right now. Have you been down that way? You should go take a look. It's in our backyard. We're a small province. It's all backyard, all of us, right? And I think if someone works hard for their earnings and wants to have, an outcome when they retire and you want to have that place, I would rather have that place where it's going to be safe and where you can actually spend time and not sink $300,000 of all of your career's hard work, a place that's going to end up in the ocean. We need a coastal act so we can actually better protect the places that we want to enjoy. We're called Canada's Ocean Playground. So here's do's and don'ts for settlers. Don't upset the apple cart. Don't go too crazy. Don't go changing everything. Don't create new ways of doing things. Be the first to do anything. Don't be the first to do anything. Don't look at the bigger picture, and don't explore the unknown. Wow. Again, these are very specific. They're not all the other subcategories. Do's, make it achievable, reduce the risk, make things normal, uncomplicated, enhance safety and belonging, and preferably familiar. So if I was talking about a coastal act with someone like that, I would probably say, well, to be honest with you, it's not that hard. We can actually get a coastal act implemented in this province, and it's easy. I just need you to sign this petition and tell your neighbor. So that's like the most tangible, easiest thing I could ask you to do to help build support. It's really easy. But what's most important about it is, again, remember, settlers, tradition. We're going to protect the province that we love, the place that we live in, the place that we've grown up for generations. We're actually, all of our docks, all of our ports are now in jeopardy. And our livelihood outside of this province, outside of the city, is what? We are a small fishing village. This entire province, pretty much, once you really get out there, relies heavily on that industry. And that is totally in jeopardy now because of climate change. And we need a coastal act to better protect the places that we're actually building. I'm winging it like that. That was just a stab at how I would approach that topic with a settler. And then pioneers. So pioneers, do's and don'ts. Don't join conventional marketing exercises or comply with routine. They'll just shut down. They're like, dude, don't sell me anything. Get out of here. Don't give me too few options. Go on recommendations from others. Do something because it's been done that way, or if it's been required by authority, they won't listen. But what you can do is make things interesting, game-changing, things that are stimulating or innovative. Talk about beauty, nature, or justice. Make things about the bigger picture, theories, or possibilities. So one way to approach, again, a coastal act, to pioneer, I would say something to the effect of, we're doing this because we see things differently. We think a coastal act will allow us to actually try new models of sustainably living with our constantly eroding shorelines. And we have a program called Living Shorelines where we teach homeowners how to reinforce the banks of your property with natural species that are from that area to reinforce the banks so they don't fall into the ocean. A coastal act would give us the ability to try new approaches, new methods and models for protecting that coastline. It gives us that flexibility. And we're all about taking a new approach to this. And this is the first step in allowing us to have that conversation. There you go. Stab at it. So, I'm near and wrapping up here. I'll just quickly address a few points. I'm sure there's more, but like, what are some of the limitations to this kind of approach? Well, can the climate crisis be changed right now at the stage we're in by making minor changes in decisions? Minor behavioral changes, is that what's going to really do it at this stage? I don't know. I don't think so, unless we all do it tomorrow. Does it address the need to shift our values? Maybe that's more important. Maybe we need to rethink our place in our natural environment and think about why we buy things and unnecessary things and the impact that has. And again, going back to the finite pool of worry, does this approach really cause a bit of distraction, and would we be focusing the lens too quickly? But the way I want to, anyone want to add to that list? Okay. Toss the hand up if you want to. When I envision meetings with community members, concerned community groups, government, business, NGOs, nonprofits, either in the developing world or even here at home, how are we going to all speak the same language and get to the same consensus that something needs to change and it impacts all of us? How do we do that? And how does that message really carry some weight? So that's pretty much near the end of my presentation. I think I have one more slide. I just spoke about all that. I do think before you do anything, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, we need to think about how we're going to communicate. If you just did a research paper, where's it going to go now? If you just did your thesis, my thesis advisor asked me, he goes, well, now what are you going to do with it? You did all this great work, but if you don't get it out there, if you're not communicating it out there, it's just going to sit in a shelf in a database somewhere. Well, where's that going to go? Where's that thinking going to go? If you're going to start a campaign, if you're going to try to help someone in a disaster situation, if you want to communicate to the rest of the world that disaster situation needs more attention, how are you going to do that? So to just finally finish up, I do want to say that we are a membership-based organization. So consider becoming a member of the Ecology Action Center if you're not already. It's where I work. You can ask me questions about it. You get 3 of our magazines a year, which is a really neat way to kind of stay informed with what's happening in our province. You get 2 emails a month. You'd actually be staying connected and informed with our work. So if you're not originally from Nova Scotia, wherever you're from, it's a great way to find out what is happening in your backyard and how you can instantly get connected with it. You can't put it on your resume. I look at resumes all the time. It's nice to see what civic organizations you participate in. It shows that you've got some ambition to get connected with things that are happening on the ground. And it's the most direct way. What more direct way can you help the environment than support the 45 activists that are working around the clock to make that difference? So if you're interested, chat with me about how you can get involved with the Ecology Action Center. That's it. So did you see what I was just trying there? I was like, who is going to be in that room, and how do I pitch membership after just talking about this entire prospector, settlers, and pioneers? So I kind of like, okay, so stay in the know, get to know people, okay, help my career, okay, and I was just trying to think and have some fun, and I want to see if anyone picked up on it.
Good work.
Thanks. Does anyone have any questions? Do you want to have a conversation about this? Is the peril of our natural environment at the state it's in because of our failure to communicate? I don't know. Or we don't have to go that deep back there. So we don't actually have that answer because we're about to approach it. We're about to focus on a communication strategy for the organization. So we're really unique. So since we're flatlined in 7 different action areas, every action area has its own focus, and they all have their own mission deliverables based on the funding that they're receiving for their grants or for their foundations. So it can be very targeted specific, like, it could very much be just solely my job is to just get a coastal act and here's how I want to do it. And a communication strategy could be a part of that proposal, but some of it could just be collecting research and then how we disseminate that research. But then you could go to the opposite side of the coin, and I'm actually going to work with our energy team on this topic because it's so energy focused, and who are they trying to communicate and how do we change those behaviors? So every team can act independently to get to their own little target niche audiences. If you wanted to talk about the overall strategy of the organization, we don't have a cohesive communication strategy as of yet to be able to attack that in one way. But here's what's interesting that I think we could address in your question is that it's not always just one message stream. You're right, the media can control how they want to portray it based on the press releases we do. But luckily, we live in 2015. We got Facebook, Twitter, we got Instagram. We do our membership surveys where we can get direct feedback yearly from the 4,000 supporters that we have. So each one of those can have its own different audiences and its own strategies behind it. So thinking about, who are our followers on social media and finding out a little bit more about them, and then we could guide our communications to that. I've done some work as well with a few other national environmental groups around this topic, and they're also kind of grappling with this a little bit too. It's like, how do we target that audience? Who is the most active? Where can we transform volunteers into, engaged board members, and how do we make that shift? So, long story short, we don't have an overarching strategy yet. I think we want to get one, and that our individual action areas can kind of take it on. But it's a challenging question, and that's why I want to do this. I think we as an organization need to pose that question more. Who are we really trying to target? And don't just talk to ourselves. Yeah, that's a really good question.
Okay.
And
So
don't worry,
let's start with the first one.
it's not too intense because I think about that a lot actually.
Okay.
So to address the first one,
Yeah.
is that people give you cues all the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, having enhanced observation skills. My father was an RCMP sergeant, and he trained me at the age of like 4 to be like, Ryan, that guy just walked in here, what's his motivation, what does he want? I'm like, yeah, you're crazy, you're a cop. But having really good observation skills. So like for instance, if I'm going to someone's home, I can tell by the stickers on their car, I can tell by the toys in the driveway, the age of the children, I can tell how often they're actually throwing out the recycling, I can tell how often they've been home by how much mail is left on their doorstep, I can actually, like, by the sights and smells in their home as soon as they open the door. So using your observation skills.
Right.
And then applying that, and then also people give you cues. Once you start talking, because I don't like to go scripted, I like to just chat and connect. And I feel like it's all about connecting. And once you start connecting with people, you find ways where you find common ground. And I'm always looking for opportunity for common ground, because I believe strongly in the concept of unity, that we're all, I don't want to get too out there, but for how big this universe is, and for how small our world is, and for how connected we are all one. And I try to operate on that principle as much as possible. So now to manipulation, I mean, it's tricky because if you look into fundraising psychology and the way that fundraising works, and this is where my world lives in a lot, I mean, some would see it as, some could perceive it that way. And I mean, it depends on how you want to go about, how you want to go about it, and whether or not it would compromise your activities. And I think that's where I always start from in terms of how I'm going to communicate with someone, connect with someone. I would always do it in a way that would never compromise the thing that I'm speaking on behalf of. And it's subjective. You could say, well, that's still manipulation because you walked up to my yard, you already knew that, I kayak, and so you're bringing up kayaking. You're trying to get an outcome out of me here, But I mean, I'm using my skills and the observations around me to get there. But again, I think that's what's really important, because I do some fundraising consulting work, and I think the best message I could ever give out is that never do anything that would ever compromise your values or your mission or what you're trying to do. Because the minute you do that, you're not authentic to who you really are, and you can't do anything from that point forward. And that actually is the foundation of true fundraising, is you would never do anything that would ever compromise what you're trying to really do. Best answer I got. So it varies. The preferred member is a monthly donor, and it's any amount that you want to do per month, and you can change it at any time. It's the most efficient use of our donor dollars, which Professor Cameron brought up are very, very scarce. So yeah, that's one. Or you could just, students $25 for 1 year, cash check or credit card, and you get a tax receipt out of it too. But what's neat is we consciously chose a membership model purposefully. We don't have to. Greenpeace is not a membership group. Ecology Ottawa, who's doing amazing work in Ottawa, is not a membership-based group. They don't give out tax receipts. We chose that model because of the democratic nature of membership. Every member can vote at our AGM. Every member can create a quorum if they wanted to. So if you got 15 other members, or I think 25 other members together, you could call a special meeting of our directors. And actually, membership, if you look at the organizational structure of our organization, sit right at the top. And we chose to do that purposefully because we believe in the power of everyone having a bit of a voice and keeping it inclusive. And that's why we try to keep membership rates really low. Yeah, I also think off the cuff here, I think we're being constantly manipulated all the time all around us. And we're being bombarded by it day in, day out, be it by the media, be it by the commercials on our television, be it by a lot of things. And I think what's interesting is the stuff that this is kind of presenting are marketing mechanics applied to how a nonprofit, or not even nonprofit, this can actually apply to a lot of different other areas, but this is nothing new to them. What are the billions of dollars that are put into psychological testing around products and testing a product before it even hits the market? One that's just like, well, let's just put it in a green bottle. They're gonna think it's a green environmental product, right? So we're being constantly manipulated all the time. I'm not saying therefore that means it's okay, but I'm just pointing out the fact that it is all around us. Really good question. So some of you may have heard there was a series of audits done on environmental charities nationwide, and we were one of the first 7 to happen 2 years ago, and we came out of the audit just fine. And the response from the audit was that to maintain charitable status in Canada, you are only allowed to do a certain allowable amount of political activity, and for the charity, for the size of our organization, that is 10%. And the definition on what is charitable and non-charitable is quite complex, and we have a few great lawyers that really give us a lot of free advice on how to handle these situations. So we evaluate quite closely, but what's interesting about that question is because we were audited, a lot of the dialogue nationwide became, well, are they trying to scare charity? And I don't want to get into that debate, especially because I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Ecology Action Center on that note, but what I will say is that the allowable amount, we were far below the allowable amount that we're actually allowed to conduct. And we actually have tracking systems in place. And unfortunately, but fortunately too, because the CRA, and this is important, is not out to get us or anyone necessarily, but they just want to make sure it's done right. And the way that we've approached it is all of our coordinators and everybody at the organization just has to track, like most people do now, this day and age, how many hours are you spending on this topic, how many hours a week are you spending on that topic. And then we financially audit our organization once a year by external auditors, so then the day that CRA shows up, Canada Revenue Agency shows up, here's the buckets, everything's all in order, and I really have to give extreme praise to our financial director who took, going through that audit took up a lot of our charitable time and resources, and we came out unscathed because she does a really good job and we as an organization do our best. So. Yeah, it has. It's led to more strong conversations on the topic than I've ever seen before the audit came about. It's forcing us to actually just scrutinize really quickly, like, okay, does this fall into which category? And if it does, what is that one committee at? What are we at overall? Our policy director handles a lot of that, and again, that's when we would consult our lawyers. We don't shy away. So that was actually, so the minute that this all happened, a very quick conversation that came after is, well, this is not going to scare us. This is going to enable us. That we just do it intelligently. We know how much we're allowed to do and exercise our full rights as a charitable group to do that. Because the number one thing our members actually want to see out of us is actually policy change. And you know what I heard somewhere, and I spent literally an hour researching this, but someone told me like 5 years ago that the word policy makes people internally crumble. And I looked, and someone told me that, and I believed it. I've been saying it for years, and I probably shouldn't have, but I did a bunch of research. I couldn't find it. But anyways, yeah, we just have to have stronger conversations about it and think about how that has an impact, because we do covet our charitable status greatly. So. Well, I mean, if I was in a face-to-face interaction with someone, I would talk about it. They would probably bring it up before me.
Yeah.
They would probably be like, it wasn't like this 40 years ago, and it is now, and I've got grandkids, and I would be like, I feel you. I had to have a very serious conversation with my wife to be like, I want to have kids in this climate. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
We don't know. Anyway, so yeah, so I mean, naturally it's going to happen. I mean, whether or not I would be like, seize on that.
Yeah.
Do it. I mean, I personally carry out this kind of stuff really naturally, and we try to find people who are kind of naturals at it to touch on that. It would be kind of hard not to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I believe that everybody is an individual, and you got to talk to everybody the way you both see eye to eye, and you're going to see eye to eye on some of those things. Age trends are really interesting because, especially in terms of donor activity, the landscape is greatly changing. The membership model came out of like World War II in associations with unions and groups, and that is now eroding and changing very quickly. And so I personally am thinking very hard about, I didn't even know I fall into the group of millennials, but I do. How do I, and what are we going to look like in 25 years as an organization when it's not ingrained in people to support and get actively involved, when collectivism is the new activism? So there's definitely very strong and intriguing things that we need to think about in the charitable sector. Look at. Yeah, good question.
Thank you, Ryan. A very wonderful energy and fascinating discussion.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.